We're now live, Chair.
That's great, Kirsty, thank you. Welcome everybody to tonight's first audit meeting of the financial year. A special welcome as well to those new members. I think Councillor Kearney, you're a new member. Councillor Bellinger, who's running a bit late, has been on the committee before, but he is new this year. So welcome to you both. We're holding I'll hand over to Isabel before I start the meeting with the first item. But we are holding obviously the first meeting on Zoom because the town hall is closed this evening for filming. Isabel, I'll bring you in at this point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whitaker. Just a sort of short statement to say that the validity of an online meeting has recently been questioned, so we're seeking advice from the LGA, and should we find that the meeting is endorsement is not valid, we'll include any agreements that were made in this agenda on the next agenda, so we can just ratify those decisions. So it's just a sort of, if whatever we decide at this meeting, we can then include in the next meeting's agenda, which will be held in person. That was all. Thank you, Councillor Whitaker.
Thanks, Isabel. So we do have a number of items this evening to discuss and some statutory decisions to make. So if needs be, as Isabel says, we will ratify those at the next meeting if they're not valid online. So we'll crack on. Item number 1 is substitutes nominated for this meeting and apologies for absence. Diane and or Kirsty. Have we had any?
It's me that's clerking, Councillor Whitaker. No, there are no substitutes and no apologies for this evening.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Item number 2, members' interests. Just to remind members of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they may have in relation to the items included in the agenda. You can either declare them now, please, or as they crop up throughout the meeting. Item number 3, admission of the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for the consideration of any of the items of business on this agenda this evening. Item number 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of February 2023 to be agreed as a correct record and signed by the chair. Any comments on those minutes, or do I have a proposer and seconder? Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just wonder if we can have a look at the minutes because I think there are some matters arising that ought to be considered at this stage of the meeting.
Have you got anything in particular?
Yeah. Okay, if you've got the thing on a device. So adult care charges, it was number 48B in the minute, and in the third paragraph it refers to compliance with audit arrangements and the limited level of assurance that was still agreed in view of what's been happening. So that minute then goes on to say only one of the recommended actions had been taken out of 9. And I think there's an update later on in the papers. As everybody knows, there's a lot of papers tonight. I think that some more are being looked at, but certainly only 7 of the 9 have actually got on the list to be looked at thus far. And I remember at the last meeting, this was being considered very carefully. The state of the adult finance, adult services department was deficient in so many ways. That's why a limited opinion has been given and maintained. Anyway, it was resolved, it says, A, that the head of internal audit be requested to submit a report on adult care charges to the audit committee meeting scheduled to be held on the 30th of May. And it was just to check. I couldn't see it on the agenda, and I just wanted to check whether that in fact will be reported upon this evening as it was resolved last time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. I believe that is item number 12 because it's come back to audit committee.
I see. So I can relax that is covered by the agenda tonight.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, and the other thing I've noticed, Chair, is, again, I don't know where it is in the papers, but you'll probably know. There was some questions being asked about the legality, if you like, or the appropriateness of the members that have been appointed to the committee. And I think it was to do with the fact that the real decision makers in an organisation, i.e. in our case, cabinet members, should not be members of the audit committee. And I think, you know, as a general rule, that's probably a good thing in any organisation. You don't want the main decision makers making decisions about audit. So I just wonder if that's scheduled to be discussed as well this evening.
It is, Councillor Lee. It's discussed in a couple of reports. I am going to discuss it under item number 7, under the, no, I'm not. I'm going to discuss it under the AGS, because that is, well, it's mentioned in a couple of reports, but we'll discuss it at that point, because it is sit for guidance that we shouldn't really be having any cabinet members as part of the audit committee. So
okay,
I'll bring that back at that point.
So as far as you know, Chair, we've got everything covered that we've brought forward into the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Councillor Kearney.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just something I'd noticed on the I mean, obviously I'm new to the committee, so I wasn't involved in the last meeting, but there was a section on audit committee effectiveness, and there was a skills assessment, and I was just sort of wondering, you know, if there was any plans for that exercise to be repeated for members like myself, who have not been on this committee before.
Yeah, it's certainly like an ongoing review, I suppose, of the skill set that we have on the board. So certainly I'm working with, I'll continue to work with Amanda Venning as well, to see when the next assessment, self-assessment is of that, because yeah, it does need regularly looking at, especially when we have new members come on board. But I'll pick that up after the meeting with her to see what next is planned for that.
Right, thank you.
Anybody else got any comments on the last minute? Is anybody happy to propose those as a true record?
Yep, I am.
Thanks. Oh, I don't know who that was. Oh, Councillor Lee. Hey, sorry, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Pressure. Thank you. Okay. Item number 5, appointment.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, was it Councillor Pressure seconded it, but I don't know that she was at the meeting.
Doesn't matter, Councillor Lee.
Okay, thank you.
A member of the meeting can still pass a set of minutes. Councillor Hayes proposed it. Councillor Prashad seconded it, but you do need to vote on it, I'm afraid.
Apologies, I missed that bit out.
No, thank you.
All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Item number 5, appointment of the Deputy Chair for 2023-2024 municipal year. Members will be aware that it was former Councillor James Baker, who is no longer a councillor, so we do need to appoint a new deputy. Is there anybody who is interested? I can, the selling point is that you don't have to do much. So don't all jump at once. Anybody?
Yeah, I'd like to propose Councillor Bellinger that having James Baker as the deputy seemed to work last year, and I remember making a similar proposal last year, and I don't think we ever needed to invoke a deputy chair taking any role in this. But yeah, I propose Paul Bellinger for that. If anybody wants to second it.
I think really that's a decision for Paul to make himself when he joins the meeting. Could it be put perhaps towards the back end of the agenda?
I'm here in the meeting.
He's there.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'll put myself forward for that. I think I was deputy chair in the past, wasn't so?
You were, and I don't think you needed to do much, did you?
No, I didn't know. So no, that's fine. Yeah, I'll do that.
I'll make sure that that's the case again.
Yeah, please don't have any time off.
Okay. So do we have a seconder for Councillor Bellinger? Councillor Kearney, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Bellinger.
You're welcome.
Okay, item number 6 is the Audit Committee work plan. Just one thing to highlight really, which is it's also mentioned in the draft annual report, which will be considered later on, is that I do want to introduce a new actions log just so we can keep a record. It would sit alongside the work plan just so we can keep a record of the recommendations and any requests that we make as a committee, so that we can, you know, keep track of what those are and that they are actually followed up and brought back to the to a future meeting. I've spoken to David Howard, who's the interim head of audit, internal audit, just about the logistics of this. For instance, who is actually going to follow it up and monitor it, etc. I'm hoping it'll be in place for the next meeting. David, I don't know if you have anything further to add on that particular point.
No, not really. Only that if members agree it, I'll speak to committee services about how we're going to actually implement it and who's going to start to do the legwork around it. But I think we can have that discussion once members decide whether or not they wish to introduce the log or not.
Okay. So I'd like to put that forward as a recommendation after people have had the opportunity to speak on this item. Does anybody have anything to say or comments to make? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. You're seeing item 2.1, need for decision. It reminds every member of the committee that we are charged with responsibility for governance. And then later in 14 it says the work plan contains all known issues that will need to be considered by the committee. And I just want to check that somewhere in tonight's agenda, this whole issue of the adults service and the 9 items that were being gone through have been addressed since our last meeting to some extent, and that we'll receive a report from somewhere saying that we are attending to all known issues. And from reading it earlier on, I think that 2 of the 9 have not been looked at yet. So perhaps someone can confirm that we're compliant with what the report says in 4.2. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Councillor Lee, I'm going to park that until we discuss the report in item 12, because I think that is valid. But I'd rather speak about it when we pick up that item, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Councillor Hay.
Hi there. Yeah, based on comments later in the deck, it looks like the external audit for 21-22 will only be completed at the end of the year, and that's just a general expectation, I believe. So review by the committee is likely to go into next year. I'm just looking at page 14, and it says that Ernst & Young are going to report back on the 2nd of October. So I didn't know whether that was right or I was misunderstanding.
Can I answer that one? Ernst & Young are due to come in August to finalise our 21-22 accounts. So we should be able to, we're hoping that we will be able to come back to the committee by October for those. So it won't be this year's accounts, it will be the previous year's accounts. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
At
least I should think they should probably present a status to us.
Yeah, because I thought I read it said that they hadn't actually started.
No, they have started it. They've just got some final elements they need to undertake, but they're so short of resources they can only programme it in for August of this year.
Okay.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Kearney.
Thanks, Chair. It was just a quick question on how do you go about asking for things to be added to the work plan? My understanding is that the Strategy and Performance Committee are going to be looking at the complaints process for the within the council. And when I'd been talking about that when we were deciding who was going to go on what committee, and the colleague that had asked me if I had to consider going on to this committee had suggested that it might be able to look at the complaints process through the lens of audit. So I was just sort of wondering how we would go about asking for some information to look at in order to, you know, to look at it through that way.
Yeah, my understanding it was looked at not last year, the year before, if they've been on the committee longer than me can remember it. Anybody? My understanding is that we have had a report about it, but I could be totally wrong in that and have read it in a different context. Nobody seems to be making any noises, so maybe I'm wrong. Is there something in particular that you're looking to look at, Councillor Kearney?
Not really. It was just like there's some things that I sort of learned from a resident that I thought, you know, didn't seem right. I mean, I work in a complaints environment within like a large employer in the area, so it was just to sort of, you know, get a look at it. You know,
okay. So I remember on strategy and performance last year when I was on it, we did look at, I think it was S&P. We did look at the complaints process and compliments, and without knowing the specific thing that you want to look at, I'm not sure that it does actually fall within audit committee remit or with strategy and performance. So I'm happy to pick that up with you afterwards and see what it is that you want to look at and see if we can work it into the work plan if it is indeed an audit.
Okay.
Remit.
Chair, sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
It's something that's been brought to strategy performance quite a number of times in the past.
Yeah.
I've chaired S&P for 3 years. So yeah, it'd been before me, you know, 2 or 3 times in that period. So yeah, it's something that strategy performance really would pick up on, to be quite honest. Unless there were serious issues, then obviously they'd probably come to audit then, but other than that, stays with them.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thanks, Councillor Bellinger. Yeah, Councillor Kearney, I'll pick up that conversation with you after, if that's okay, and see if there is anything that we need to look at as audit committee. Isabel, did you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, I was only going to say if Councillor Kearney has special knowledge in that area, it might be helpful for him to talk to the chairman of that committee, because it might be that he can give some insight into that committee and the work that they're doing. Just an idea.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Martin Townsend.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a small point, really, but I think a positive one. I noticed that the format of this report had changed from previous meetings. And I was just going to say I found it helpful. I thought it was clearer with the subheadings of finance and internal audit. So it's a small point. So obviously somebody's decided to redesign it, and I think it works. So thank you.
Thanks, Martin. I will give David Howard credit for that. We did have quite lengthy conversations the back end of last municipal year about the reports and that they needed to be more succinct and clear. So I'm glad that that is coming across, and hopefully that will continue with all reports, even though it was still quite a lengthy report pack all in all. I think that actually they were more manageable in terms of reading and understandable. And I hope you agree with that as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Martin. Is there any other points anybody wants to make on this item on the work plan? No? Okay, so we'll move to the recommendations. I'll firstly put forward the recommendation that I spoke of earlier about introducing an actions log, so we can monitor all the things that we're recommending and requesting to make sure those are done. That's recommendation number 1. And the second one is that we approve the work plan for the next 12 months as per the report. I'll move those two in as a block. All in favour? That's carried. Thank you, members. Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is the 2022 to 23.
Sorry, Claire, last item, you moved it, but you didn't get a seconder. I'm really sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what's wrong with me. Keep forgetting the formalities.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Bellinger. All
Thank
those
you.
in favour? Going back to item number 6. Thank you very much. That's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 7 is the Audit Committee draft annual report. Just a couple of words from me. The report is an overview, as you've read, of the key issues we considered as a committee last year, and the work we undertook as well to support good governance of and within the whole council. Just a couple of things I'll draw your attention to, which Councillor Lee has already alluded to earlier. Just on page 3 under the membership, it's also mentioned in the annual governance statement under the next item, but the 2022 SIPFA position statement on audit committee in local authorities and the police does say that we should be established so it's independent of executive decision making and able to provide objective oversight. Now, obviously, we've got Councillor Dacre and Councillor Tim Swift now as cabinet members, so I will bring that point back under the next item to discuss it as a committee to see what our thoughts are on that, because obviously it's not compliant with that position statement. And then the other thing is on the last page of the report, just before the appendix starts, just to highlight now that the committee's terms of reference have been updated in February, we'll be arranging at least one private meeting to be held between the committee and both the internal and external auditors to give members an opportunity to raise any issues that they may have in private. So just those 2 things from me. Does anybody have anything to ask or comments on that? Martin.
Thanks, Chair. On that page 3 that you were just talking about with the members of the committee, I think the dates are on there, are they? It says 21, 22. Should it be 22, 23 on that page? Because this is the 22, 23 report, isn't it?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yeah.
David.
Yes, it is. It's apologies. It's a question, I suppose, that, dare I say, that cut and paste has beat me on this occasion.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yes, thank you very much indeed. I will correct it before the
All right.
report.
I'm sorry, I should have let you know that separately. I shouldn't have pointed out here, really. And then just to clarify, because the terms of reference as Appendix A is the existing one, isn't it? Or rather, it's the one prior to it being amended by the Audit Committee earlier this year. And is that because it's not been approved by Cabinet yet? So once it goes to Council and is approved, it would then be attached as the new version. So it's still the, if you like, the historic version rather than the one we've agreed as a new version.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It's yet to go to full council. I would hope it's meant to go in July.
I was just wondering whether would that happen before this statement is finalised, and so the updated version could be included. I don't know much on the timing of the publication.
That's a good point, actually.
Can I come back on that as well, if I can, if that's all right? Because obviously,
yeah, David.
The statement is for 22-23, and whilst you approve the changes at the February meeting, they'll actually be hopefully accepted by council at its July meeting, which is why in effect I've put a statement in effect to that effect, to say that the current terms of reference are the ones that were last approved by council back in 2018. So it's up to you. You were delivering the terms of reference through most of last year for the terms of reference that were approved in 2018. I could add the terms of reference that you approved in February if you wished as well. There aren't that many differences, but as a matter of fact, should we say, the 2018 terms of reference are still the ones that you're working to, because they've not been, the 2023 ones have not been updated by council. So it's your choice, members, as to which way you'd like to go. I'm happy to add the February 23 terms of reference if you wish. It might cause some confusion, but it's your decision.
Does anybody have any view on that?
Chair, I agree with what's been proposed. I think we should be at all times dealing with the most up-to-date terms of reference that we can deal with. And although it seems that they're technically not yet approved, I think we should have sight of them in the paperwork.
Yeah, okay. I suppose it's, yeah. I suppose it's just...
Yeah, as long as it does say anticipated that they'd be approved in July, unless this document's published after July, in which case you just tweak the wording, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because this report will be presented as well to full council in July.
Ah, okay, right.
So yeah, it should tie in nicely with any luck.
Right. Good
Tied
luck.
together. Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Hay.
Yeah, in the introduction on page 2, it again he's talking about the external audit issues, which are said to be widely documented, but I think sort of members of the public probably unlikely to know exactly what they are, and of course nobody's actually talked to us directly about what they are from Ernst & Young. So is it possible to briefly spell them out for a non-expert audience, and perhaps based on our earlier conversation actually be more specific about when we're expecting the 21-22 accounts to be confirmed?
Thanks, Councillor Hay. David or Isabel?
I'm happy to provide more explanation. I think probably what I'd prefer to do is in the main body of the report. I've not got the individual page, I've only got the full agenda, but it's on page 28 of the full agenda pack. There's a section there about external audit, and I think if you'd like, we can expand the narrative within that section and just make reference to it in the covering introduction, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Hay. Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to comment on the issue about membership that's touched on page 23, because I mean, whilst that's factually correct, it's probably worth just reminding people of some of the context to this. That I forget how long ago it was that councils were first required to set up audit committees, but there was a conscious decision taken at that time to initially establish it as a committee consisting of the leader and deputy leaders of each of the 3 largest groups, and to exclude that from the normal proportionality rules. I think it was only last year we changed the numbers at all, and certainly when the SIP for guidance was first drawn to the committee's attention, I can remember raising this at the time, and the then chair, former Councillor Baines, was quite insistent in arguing that we should continue with that arrangement. It was only last year that as then leader of the council I then came off. So happy to see this issue raised and discussed, but I wouldn't want people to get the impression that this situation is something that the executive has insisted on and enforced upon. It has been a cross-party agreement in the past that this should be the way the audit committee was structured.
Thanks, Councillor Swift. Yeah, no, I do appreciate it is a long-standing kind of tradition, if you like, and I suppose that is part of the discussion. And I don't think anyone's accusing of Cabinet of insisting that they be on this committee, but we do need to obviously make sure that we are compliant and not going contrary to any of the SIP for guidance. So open to discussion. Councillor Dacre.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to the terms of reference, and just because I just think that there is the risk of confusion, and if we are to put the new ones in that don't apply as yet, please I'm sure you will, but just make it absolutely clear that they're not the ones that are being worked to until they're approved. Otherwise, I think it's not transparent. It just could just cause confusion rather than clarity.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dacre. And I suppose it is a annual report of the last year, and those are the terms of references that we have been working with. So yeah, no, take your point on that. Any other comments or questions, members, before I move to the recommendations? Okay, so the recommendations is to review the draft report, which we have. Councillor Hay, just picking up on your point, David, if you could just expand on the explanation of the issues that around external audit, that would be really helpful. Authorise me as the chair to approve any amendments to the draft report. Councillor Lee, are you wanting to come in?
Yes, can you hear me? The sunlight's on the screen.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, it was very helpful, the explanation that Councillor Swift just gave. I'm sure there had to be something like that. The only reason that I raised that, and I think it is a valid point to raise, but is that this committee, of all committees, ought to make absolutely certain that everything is correct. And so, if you like, it was a mini audit of ourselves and our rules. I've no doubt about the ability of Councillor Dacre and Councillor Swift making very valuable contributions to the committee. But it was just to ensure that, you know, if we can't get it right, we can't expect other people to. Thank you, Chair. Thanks,
Councillor Lee. Just moving back to the recommendations then. So that addition, David, regarding the external auditors. Second recommendation, to authorise me as the chair to approve any amendments to the draft report, and to also request me as chair to present the report to the July full council. Can I have a seconder to those recommendations, please? Thank you, Councillor Kearney. All those in favour? That's carried. Thanks, members. I'm actually just going to change the order of business slightly and consider item 9 next, because after reading the annual report and opinion of the head of internal audit, one of the recommendations is to consider their opinion when considering the annual governance statement, which is item 8. So I'm going to bring forward item 9 first, because I think it makes sense to consider that before item 8. So we'll move to internal audit 2022-23 annual report and opinion. David, anything to add to your report?
Well, you took me by surprise, Chair, that you've brought it forward, but no, no, I don't think so. Not really. I've tried to explain. Obviously, only been in position since mid-February. I've not 100% aware of everything that went on during the first sort of 10 months of the year, but it's my understanding the report's sort of a fair representation of the work that internal audit have undertaken during the year. The things that I probably would point out is that in the past, it appears that the previous head of internal audit hasn't provided a one-word assurance opinion. I think that's an important thing for committee to understand, or to get my view, I suppose, about the appropriateness of assurance over key business processes and internal controls and governance, etc. And I've given it reasonable assurance based on the work that internal audit have undertaken. And of course, reasonable assurance is this sort of out of the 4 categories, the second one from the top one being significant, and then reasonable, limited, and low. So I think that's a fair and reasonable assessment, and I am happy to give that opinion to the committee. One of the issues that I would raise as well is right at the end of the report under paragraph 8, which talks about future service delivery for internal audit. The head of internal audit job has not yet been advertised, but the role profile, job description and adverts have been prepared. It's just a matter now of waiting for the advert to be published. It's hoped that a new head of audit will be in post by August. Whether we'll achieve that or not, I don't know, but that's the intention. The audit manager who reported to the head of internal audit has also taken early retirement, and a decision's been made not to fill that post until the head of internal audit's been appointed, and they then have the opportunity to review the establishment of internal audit, in effect looking at what they believe is required and whether or not the right people are in the right posts. So that's been a deliberate decision by myself and Isabel acting as head of finance to not recruit to the post. The final paragraph, dare I say, it was my misunderstanding and is incorrect. We have appointed a IT auditor. I wasn't aware of the fact because the paperwork never passed my desk. But an auditor that was in the team stepped up to that position and is now fulfilling that position. So we are undertaking IT audit through the senior auditor IT, and the position that they've stepped up from is now vacant. And again, I need to speak to Isabel about whether we're going to recruit to that role or not. If the positions remain empty, whether or not the internal audit plan as it currently is going to be presented to committee will be able to be delivered in the first 6 months or not is what shall I say, open to doubt, like all these things. We don't have a full establishment, but again we can maybe discuss that at the when we're discussing the internal audit plan. But apart from that, Chair, just pointing the issues about future delivery of the service, I don't have anything else to add at this time to the report itself.
Thanks, David. And can I just thank you as well for pulling all of these papers together. I know you've not had long in the post at all to do it. So thank you for your efforts. And they're definitely reports, or the kind of reports we want to see in the future as well, with how short they are and succinct. So thank you. Councillor Prashad.
Yes, I've just got a question on other internal audit work undertaken. And so towards the bottom of that, you have assisting with the referral to the former Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy of incorrectly paid COVID-related grants, which the council has been unable to recover. Do we have any figures on that, please?
That's a good question. The financial figures, I asked myself to say, could I put some figures into the report? But dare I say, I was beaten by my own staff. The person who deals with this was on annual leave when I was preparing the report, I'm afraid. So I've got no figures to share with you, because I actually pressed and say we must have a spreadsheet, etc. But I can provide that information outside the committee meeting to committee members if you so wish.
That would be lovely, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Prashad. Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I was just going to echo what David has said, really, that providing a single overall assurance opinion is something I've seen elsewhere. It's not just simply something David's come up with as an idea of his own. So I have seen it elsewhere. And I think, I don't think you could conclude anything other than reasonable looking at the opinions in 4.3. I think that's absolutely right, isn't it? It's there's been minimal below that, quite a few above, but I think that brings you down to reasonable overall. So I was just going to say, I agree with what's been proposed here. So thanks.
Thanks, Martin. Councillor Dacre.
Yeah, well, I suppose all I would say is that whenever I hear about one word assessments, I think of Ofsted and the trouble that can cause. So I don't think I actually have any strong views on it in this way, but they can be simplistic. So I just, I don't think it's just necessarily always a good thing.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dacre. Any further comments or questions, members? Okay, we'll move to the recommendations, which is to consider and comment upon the internal audit annual report, which we've done, and to take into account the interim head of internal audit's opinion when considering the annual governance statement for 2022-23, which is the next item. So can I have a seconder for those recommendations, please? Councillor Bellinger, thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you, members. Okay, moving on, but backwards a bit, to item 8, draft annual governance statement 2022-23. Just a couple of points from me. Just a note on the previous year's AGS, 2021-22. The committee approved it in August last year, but I believe it's only available through the audit committee agenda papers. I don't know who I'm asking this question to. It might be you, David, or Isabel. Can we publish this on the council's website just for ease of access and transparency? Anybody?
Sorry, I'm trying to turn the microphone back on. I can see no reason why not, if it's just if it's just referred to as audit committee agreed. I'm sure that's something that can be arranged, and I'll look into it, Chair, to make that available on the website.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, David. And I think you've answered my next question about when the terms of reference are going to full council, and if it's July, then that's fine. Any questions from members before I bring in the conversation about our membership requirements? Councillor Hay.
Yeah, just in terms of the actions and the position on project management, that sounds quite positive for something that's been in these reports for between 5 and 10 years. So I was just wondering, and I don't want to put any words into anybody's mouths, but if the actions that are described in the March 2023 position for project management, if they are achieved, would we not expect project management to be on this list next year?
And I'll answer that if I may. And I think we'd expect that to be cleared off. Next year's AGS should include, in effect, a summary of what's being delivered, and hopefully, if the action's taken, address the concerns that are down on whatever page it is of the report. Then yes, we should clear it off. And I must admit, it was something that I'd say to committee that if it's not cleared off, and even it's been on the AGS for 7 years, and in effect, it's almost something that maybe committee need to decide how they want to oversee the delivery of these actions to make sure it's not on for 8 years and being included on next year's AGS.
David, Councillor Hay, do you want to come back on that? Yeah,
well, that's right. It's really useful. That's David's general expectation, and obviously we can't promise because we don't know how the actions are going to be implemented. So I think it sounds like he may be directing us towards actually having a review of this at some point in the next 6 months to see whether the actions that are there are heading in the right direction, and collectively we've got comfort that we're doing what we want.
Thanks, Councillor Hay. David, just on that point, is there any pressure, I suppose, that we as an audit committee can put on corporate leadership, if that's who is taking the lead on making sure this is delivered?
Well, first of all, without me going back to the work plan, I can't recall offhand when an AGS update will come to committee. So you might be getting something. I think there's a meeting in November. Let me just have a quick look through to see where the work plan is, because that would give you the opportunity to question and challenge progress, should we say, against the AGS actions. So let's have a look. It's no, it's not December. There should be an AGS update, an update report.
Okay.
Is it? Oh, it's coming to February. I've got it down as February. So you might think either that's too late for the year, or you might want to bring it forward, or just in effect, you could almost ask, I suppose, if you wished, as you do for the internal audit reports, to receive an update on progress made against project management. I mean, that's well within your remit to do so. I mean, the AGS items falls within the audit committee's terms of reference, and I can see no reason why you can't ask for an update specifically about project management.
Okay.
Yeah,
go on.
Sorry, to sort of put pressure on, I think that's probably the only thing that you could do is ask for some, ask for an update and more information.
Okay. I think Martin, Councillor Hay, if you're all right with that, I'm going to put that as one of the recommendations to have a report on that.
Yeah, no, that seems sensible, doesn't it? And it does. I think it does say internal audit have planned to undertake a review. Sorry, David might have already said this. A review towards the end of the calendar year, so that might give us a nice timing. Whether that's December or February, might give us the right timing to review it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Prashad.
Yes, I've got a couple of questions. The first one is on policy management. Reading the 3 statements there about officers unclear on policy approval routes, no central record of policies, how quickly is this going to be put into place, that council officers are actually trained in these? Because as far as I'm concerned, that's sort of because they don't know policies, this is possibly where things are going wrong. So that's the first question for somebody.
Well, again, if I can come back, the issue about policy management's been talked about at the Officer Governance Group for quite some time, on and off, from what I understand, for a couple of years or more. I think the issue is that it's sort of come to a head almost because, well, let me have a think, got to be careful what I say here, but internal audit, when they undertook a review once or twice, found out that officers were unclear as to how policies they wish to approve and update and amend should actually go through and be presented through to members, or which officer group, if they were a sort of just an officer related policy, needed to approve them. And when I've been in discussion with the head of legal and democratic services, he believes that this needs to be tied up as it does with another issue, which is about a review of the Constitution. So the intention that both issues will be tied up and sorted, hopefully by the end of September, with a view then to almost, I'd say, adapting or rolling out, adopting and rolling out whatever changes are going to be required, I presume from sort of October to the end of the year. But again, there'll be an update that's provided to committee at its February meeting as progress that's been made. But again, going through the 3 items there, obviously the first one's that. The second one is about making sure that officers are aware of the policies and have read and understand them. And there's been some talk about purchasing some policy management software where in effect you put policies in, staff would read it, say they've signed it, do a little test to say they've understood it. And the issue isn't about making sure they understand the issue. It's probably more about the fact that if something went wrong, senior management need to go back and say, but have you read the, I don't know, equal opportunities policy, or have you read the data protection policy? And if we have, it gives officers less of a sort of leg to stand on, I suppose, to defend themselves. And at the moment, we're in a position whereby we don't really have that information. We can provide it, but we don't know if they've read it and understood it. And obviously the last one is just linked again back to the updating the constitution, there needs to be a central record of all
Yeah.
policies that are in place.
That's correct. Okay, thank you. My second question is under section N. The council has an interest in two companies, C&K Careers Limited and Weave Yorkshire Limited. There seems to be an omission there of the company Calderdale One. Are you aware of that company?
I'm not aware of Calderdale One.
Ah, okay. Right.
Yeah, if I can come in on that one, Chair, that's a company that we set up as a trading arm, which allows us, because we're a non-for-profit organisation, but Calderdale One was set up so we could actually generate profit through commercialisation.
Calderdale One has not been renamed to Weave Yorkshire Limited, has it, by any chance?
No,
Weave
it's a
is
completely different company.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what I'll do, obviously, is because there's a draft and now you've raised that, I will actually go back and find out some more about Calderdale One and find out what its position is and update the AGS accordingly for when it gets finally approved. I must obviously, I will say that I wasn't aware that Calderdale had any companies, and in fact other officers have told me that we only have two and these are theirs. So somebody somewhere is probably also unaware that Calderdale One exists. So I will do some digging on that, and like I say, and update the AGS accordingly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David and Councillor Prashad. Isabel, are you wanting to come in on this point?
Yeah, I was only going to say that there's been no activity on Calderdale One, which is possibly why there's people are not aware that it's there. We've filed accounts, nil accounts over the last few years, so there's no activity actually happened. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Isabel. Councillor Kearney.
I was expecting you to call somebody else first. It was on the policy management sort of bit, you know, like I'm talking about the officers, which I presume will be the whole, you know, like population of workers at the council, having to read and understand policies. Like taking my council hat off and putting my hat on where I'm an employee of an organisation that's got a myriad of policies and umpteen, you know, loads of procedures that would follow that. I would have thought that it would be important that the officers had all the, you know, relevant policies to hand and knew where to find them, and rather than be able to recall them off the top of their head, you know, read and understand, do tests, you know, on them. That there could be like an annual training thing, you know, like where they get refreshers on, you know, things that apply to their roles within the council. But it just seems a bit strange to have a requirement for them to read all the policies and prove that they understand them when, you know, they could just have them to refer to.
Thanks, Councillor Kearney. I don't know if anybody wants to come back on that. David, no?
Well, all that I can say is that I think any policies that an organisation have, all the policies don't apply to all employees, but there are a key number, for example, that probably apply to everybody. Probably things like, you know, health and safety, for example, is the obvious one that applies to everybody. So, and again, there might be different levels of health and safety policy applying to people that are out, you know, collecting the rubbish or looking after parks, for example, than they would be that somebody like myself that's just, you know, sat at home most of the time at a desk working on the IT equipment. But again, it's important that everybody is aware of and has read, because if they don't say they've read and understood, or we as a council can prove they've read it, if there's an accident, for example, with health and safety, we've got to be able to show somebody to say, you will not do such and such because it's a health and safety policy, And if we're unable to show that, then we're unable to defend whatever claim we might be receiving. So I know it might seem a bit OTT to make everybody read it, but there's a core set of policies that probably most people need to be aware of and read. They don't need to read every policy that we prepare. And I think that's one of the issues, is that we've no record as to which policies apply to which employee and whether or not they've read and understand them. So I understand where Councillor Cairn is coming from, but I think I'd probably push back a bit on that and say I think it is important that the policies that apply to them, they need to read and understand.
Thanks, David. Councillor Dacre.
Thank you. I suppose I'd say that actually I'm more bothered about policies. So, for instance, like health and safety being understood, because we want to make sure that we don't have any claims against us, or that we don't do harm to people, rather than necessarily being able to use them as a disciplinary exercise, which I know is how policies can tend to end up being used. But anyway, what I'd actually wanted to talk about was just project management, and just again, it's a bit like Councillor Swift earlier on, giving some background to this. I recognise it's been in the annual governance statement for a number of years, but what I think it is important to say is that it isn't that it's just been waved by. Questions have been asked and actions have been taken, but I suppose what the issue is, perhaps from my point of view, that maybe those questions and the actions are not as transparent as they could be, so they're not perhaps recorded as well as in the annual governance statement. So it is, by looking back over the years, you can't see what has been going on, why that maybe hasn't succeeded in solving the problem entirely, and then what adapted actions were taken to deal with the fact that we still hadn't got to where we wanted to be. So I don't want people to think that it's just been ignored, but I do appreciate that it's not obvious to somebody looking from the outside what has been going on to try to address the issue.
Thanks, Councillor Dacre. Yeah, no, I appreciate that context, and thank you for that, which is why I think it's probably a good idea that we do have a report on that particular concern, and we can properly question that and get some clarity about what has been done and how much further we need to go with some of this stuff. Martin was next, and then Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I mean, just on the policy management, I mean, there is an action agreed, isn't there, to come back later in the year. So I think it certainly does sound like there is work to do there. So I think we just wait to see what that work programme looks like when there's an update from the head of Legal and Democratic Services later in the year. And then, sorry to be pedantic again, but I've just got a minor, I think it's a typo again, David, but it may not be. In section 4H, when it talks about external audit and then goes on to talk about eternal audit. Now, I wasn't sure whether that should be external also, or whether there is actually an eternal audit process, which I suppose there is, because it never ends. So I wasn't sure whether that was actually a typo or correct. So.
Oh, well spotted. I really think eternal audit. I mean, being an internal auditor, I mean, what could be better than eternal audit? You know, when we meet our maker. So no, I will add an X. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you both. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to the knowledge of the various policies. I just wondered, you know, we all have to reply positively to the IT people regarding training about computer scanning. And unless you've done it, you don't get a certificate and questions are asked. And I think perhaps we should do some work on looking at the more widely applicable policies and doing something like we do on the computer for everybody to confirm that they've read these things. And then we know that we're where we are with it. It just sounds, listening to Councillor Dacre, you know, there's a lot can depend on whether people have or have not been aware of policies. And so perhaps we can do some work on it. And I have in my mind the model of what they do for phishing and computer scamming, some kind of an annual questionnaire going around to ask about the most important and most widespread policies that people should be aware of.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when I said that, like annual refresher training.
Thanks, Councillor Lee and Councillor Ken. Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that it was part of an induction, you know, when you join the council, that you have to read the staff handbook and be aware of all the relevant policies, etc. But yeah, I agree that some would need to be refreshed more regularly than others. And I suppose that is a point to take away. Councillor Bellinger.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little bit shocked that we're actually discussing something so basic. To be quite honest, at the end of the day, I mean, I work for Kirklees Council, and when I started with Kirklees Council, you had to do mandatory training. So you actually had to read the policies that were relevant to the department that you were actually working for. Once you'd done that, it's sort of like it's a checklist basically on the system, which then your line manager can actually see what training you've actually undertaken, what policies you've actually gone through. I can't understand that we haven't got something like this in place in Calderdale. And to be quite honest, we need to be speaking to Jackie Addison really about this. And, you know, is it in place? If it's not in place, why is it not in place? But yeah, the basic things, the basic policies that people need to read as part of their induction, or even those that have been with us for a number of years that have not done it, need to undertake it as well. So yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that we're talking about something so basic this evening.
Thanks, Councillor Bellinger. David, are we saying that isn't in place already? From your kind of investigations?
Correct. From what I understand, and Lisa Hinchcliffe, the former head of internal audit, like I say, prepared a paper or two papers to the governance group to actually introduce some software or go out to the marketplace to look at buying some software that would allow exactly what's been explained there to be introduced at Calderdale. So yeah, there's no central depository, there's no depository within individual services as far as I'm aware for their employees to say what policies they should be following, you know, if they've read and understand them. So that it is lacking, and like I say, it's been pursued by internal audit for a couple of years, but always been what should I say, pushed back. But I think senior management are aware and understand this. And again, I know it might seem, why aren't we doing something now? But I think we've got to a stage that we've flagged it up in the AGS, and it's a matter now of waiting till, in effect, that's been reviewed about where we want to go and how we want to deal with it going forward, which will in effect come back through the review that the head of legal has undertaken about how we can best manage this going forward. And of course, during that, he'll have conversations with HR and myself and Isabel and others about how best to deal with it.
Okay, thanks.
Can I come back, Chair, on that one as well? If
you can.
That's okay. It's just that we had a prime example only a couple of years back where a guy from one of the safer, cleaner, greener teams cutting the grass on a tractor, and the tractor came over and it broke his leg, which then put a stop to all grass cutting for quite a number of months. And I think that was down to the policies and health and safety not being read and understood by that operative by all accounts. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's why, and that's why policies should be read ASAP.
Yeah, sorry, correct. My understanding, again, because I wasn't there at the time, is that you were correct, issues stopped. But again, at the end of the AGS, as part of the narrative bit, I think the issue there is about steps have been taken both through central health and safety and within the service itself to introduce more policies or procedures maybe, and provide better explanation to staff about what they need and what they should be following. And again, I don't know where it is on the AGS. I know it's right at the end, but there's a reference there to, I won't say vibration white finger because that's a wrong term, but under item S in section 4, there's an issue there about health and safety. Now the health and safety team have been reviewed by the health and safety executive about management of vibration risk from the use of ride-on equipment. And the HSE complimented the council on its arrangements for managing that risk. And of course, all these things come from incidents that happen, and then we put process in place to improve it. So the AGS isn't all negative. There's positives in there as well, of which that is one.
I think we've just got to be cautious that we're not shutting the door once the horse has bolted, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ian Day, Director of Public Services. I'm going to bring you in because I can see you've patiently got your hand up to talk about on this bit.
It's
welcome.
It's not. Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, councillors. It's not particularly my area, but I can assure you, as a relatively new employee, that we have mandatory training for new starters that includes health and safety, working procurement regulations. A whole myriad of training is in place for new starters to the council with regular review dates. And on top of that, there is a whole raft of departmental procedures around health and safety, working at heights, working hand-arm vibration syndrome, operational procedures that staff have got to comply with and that managers sort of check with them. I think we're conflating two issues here. I don't think we have a policy management system. So policies sit individually without being held within a centralized system. But there are absolutely policies in place to make sure that staff can work safely and that we can follow procurement regulations. And there are checks and balances that, that we have to do that every 12 months, just as councillors would have to do their cybersecurity training every 12 months. What we don't have, and what a new system that we're putting in place should give us, is the way to check that staff have done those through the management. So all the procedures are in place, the policies are in place, staff have to complete them, they have to tick a box that they complete them, they get the certificate that Councillor Lee talked about. There is a schedule for when that training must be repeated, but those policies, managers aren't necessarily aware unless they track the certificates that training is being carried out. So I just wanted to assure committee, this isn't a glaring omission, and that new starters and existing staff are given the right training that they need to do the work that they're doing.
That's great. Thanks, Ian, for that clarity. Councillor Dacre.
Thank you. Well, I think Ian has just said much of what I might have said. It's not, and I suppose the other thing I'd say is this is very similar in some ways to some of the things we come across in the internal audits that we track, where we're talking about risks which arise from things. We're not saying that things don't happen. What we're saying is we can't always track what's happening, and that leads to the risk that maybe it doesn't happen in the way it should happen. And so, again, as Ian said, I wouldn't want everybody to go away thinking that actually nobody in Calderdale Council follows any policies or knows, or there aren't any, or nobody knows what they are. It's not like that. There are policies. It's just that they are not always they can't be tracked in the way that we would want, and occasionally that can lead to perhaps a policy not being updated when it should be, but it is not a blanket problem in the way it's sort of, I just feel it's being portrayed slightly.
Thanks, Councillor Dacre. Any further questions, members, before we discuss the membership requirements? Okay, so I'm going to open it up to thoughts on the membership with having two cabinet members on the committee. Councillor Dacre, is your hand up from before, or you just put it up again? You're on mute, Councillor Dacre, sorry.
Well, he had put it up again, but might have been a bit premature. I wasn't sure he'd actually even finished speaking.
Yep, I've finished speaking if you want to make comments on it.
Okay. Well, I suppose the first thing to say was whether I'm a member of this. When I first started attending audit, I did so as an observer, in effect, as the cabinet member for resources, because at that time I wasn't actually a member, and it was only later that I became a member. And it's also the case that if I were not a member again, if I stopped being a member, I would carry on attending as the cabinet member for resources, or whoever was in my place would carry on attending, because it's obviously important that because of the nature of the issues that arise, we would want to be there. I think some of the exchanges that we've had this evening do perhaps demonstrate that there can be potential issues arising from having the executive on the audit committee, because some of the interventions I've made this evening have been perhaps explanatory and putting forward a point of view, and it could be seen that that might suggest that I'm not sufficiently independent. I think I'm still capable of challenging officers as appropriate and seeing when there are risks and accepting that and accepting when action should be taken. But I can see why CIPFA have said that it's perhaps not appropriate. So it's obviously a matter for the panel the committee as a whole, but I can see where their concerns have arisen from. It's not perhaps more the appearance as much as anything.
Thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Dacre. Martin Townsend.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify what CIPFA has actually said on this topic. I mean, I've not read the guidance myself, which is why I'm asking the question, I suppose. And I wasn't sure whether they were saying that there shouldn't be any, in this case, cabinet members at all on this committee, or that there shouldn't be, I suppose, the balance in terms of decision making. So I mean, I think previously and currently there's a minority of cabinet members relative to non-cabinet members. So the cabinet members, if you like, couldn't actually make a decision against the will of the rest of the audit committee members. So I wasn't sure whether it was sort of not permitted to have any at all. And it just seemed to me that from what I've observed and what I've seen elsewhere in other audit committees as well, there is often, I think, a value in having some sort of link between, if you like, the board or the in this case, the cabinet, and some sort of insight, I suppose. So there is somebody who says, well, yes, actually, cabinet have talked about that, or we are talking about that. So there's some, I suppose, awareness of the cabinet agenda and discussion content brought into this meeting, rather than the audit committee operating sort of really, I suppose, independently and almost ignorantly to some extent. So, but I suppose fundamentally, what does it say? If it says you shouldn't do this, shouldn't have any cabinet members, but then it is only guidance, isn't it? So the council could decide to do something different. So that's my contribution or question.
Yeah, no, thanks, Martin. The particular sentence that's included in the draft annual report in item 7 earlier says the audit committee should be established so that it is independent of executive decision making and able to provide objective oversight. David, are you able to offer any clarity on whether that is kind of categorical that cabinet members shouldn't be included, or is that kind of open to interpretation?
Well, as everything, the guidance is open to interpretation. One of the issues that the CIPFA code that came out last year within the same section where it talks about independence and an independent and effective model, it also says the committee in local authorities should be independent of both the executive and the scrutiny functions. So it's not just saying it's part of the executive, it should be independent of executive decision making, but scrutiny as well. And I think you've got an issue that eventually with some authorities, maybe not Calderdale, but you could be in a position whereby you might not have enough members if you excluded anybody that was under a scrutiny function. It depends how you considered and evaluated that term scrutiny. But again, it has for a number of years, CIPFA has for a number of years said that the audit committee shouldn't have any board members on or any executive members on. I'm aware of some whereby executive members come and sit as observers in order to provide a link between issues that cabinet or others might be discussing, and the position that the audit committee want to take. So in effect, they're just coming along and their views are there as for information almost and guidance to allow audit committee to take a more rounded and informed decision maybe than the one that officers are presenting in the report. And again, the reason that it was flagged up is that Calderdale, and I wasn't aware from the issue that Councillor Swift raised earlier about the background to audit committees. They've probably been around for, I don't know, 20 years or more so, and I wasn't aware how Calderdale was formed initially, and I can understand then why you have executive members on. You can still have executive members on if you wish, it's your decision. But again, all I'm saying is that if there's an external review ever undertaken, I know external audit have been around, they're the only ones that have probably come along, or if you have an external review undertaken by a third party of the effectiveness of the audit committee, I'm sure they'd flag it up. So in effect, it's not statute, it's just considered to be best practice. It does say at the introduction statement, the sit for guidance as the support of the Home Office and the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities. So in effect, it's semi-official, it's semi-best practice, I suppose, or it is best practice, but you can disagree with it if you wish. It's your decision. Nobody's going to come down and say you're doing it wrong because you do have executive members on. It's just for you to decide, I think, and have a debate, and then just reference that in the minutes, whichever way you wish to go, one way or the other.
Okay, thanks, David. Councillor Kearney.
Yeah, thanks. I was sort of wondering, because this says it was 2022 that this was a position statement published. I mean, obviously that was only last year. So, but what was there a previous version, or is this a new, like a new thing that they're saying? And then, like on what Mr. Harwood was saying there, like if there was going to be a debate and a decision made, would that be something within the committee? Because I mean, there's only a small number of councillors on this, and it would seem like something that should be made, a decision that should potentially be made by a larger group. Like to make, whether to follow what this guidance means, whether we're going to follow it, blah blah.
Okay, well, if I can come back on that, the guidance, the sit for guidance was last updated in 2018 before the 2022, and the 2018 guidance included a very similar statement, not exactly, but in effect it said it should be independent and shouldn't have any cabinet members on it. As to whether or not who should take the decision, obviously the terms of reference for committees sit within the Constitution. So if there was going to be a change to terms of reference to exclude executive members, that would have to go back to council for a discussion and decision. In effect, audit committee would just be making a recommendation to council as to whether or not their terms of reference should be changed.
Okay, thanks, David. Councillor Bellinger.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, at the end of the day, like other scrutiny meetings, it depends on what's on the agenda. If we've got an item on the agenda where we feel that we could do with the input of an executive member, then we invite them along to that meeting beforehand. They don't actually have to be, on the audit committee themselves. And I think we've got enough councillors anyway to run the audit committee without exec members on it.
Yeah, and we do have that arrangement on the scrutiny boards as well. No executive members sit on the actual boards, but they do attend to have input when on the relevant items. So there's no reason why we couldn't have the same arrangement on audit if members felt that was something that we wanted to change to. Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, Mr. Harwood's covered one or two of the things I was going to try to ask on about the previous guidance that was in place in there, and the process for change, that it would be a matter for the terms of reference and hence for council approval. I suppose the question is, I mean, I'm quite happy to say there there should be a discussion about this. It's really how this committee wants to take it forward. I mean, it feels to me as it stands that there's more or less an implicit recommendation in the report as it's worded. I've lost the page, so I've not got the quite wording in front of me. That more or less implies that the committee's view is that it should be changed and executive members shouldn't be there. Whether we want to say that explicitly or whether we want to say there should be a review and a follow-up discussion, which perhaps would give people a little more time for consideration.
Thanks, Councillor Swift. Councillor Hay.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that this is, you know, in some ways it's an academic discussion until something actually goes wrong. I don't know whether you'd get into that, but you can see a scenario where if something went wrong and then, you know, the role of the audit committee in the scrutiny of that came under scrutiny, you would see weaknesses there. So I think a couple of the guys have said it earlier, haven't they? I think it is probably best to make a change, but happy to have a period of review and to think about it as well. But yeah, I think Councillor Dacre may have said it. We wouldn't want to cut ourselves off from executive expertise or officer expertise. We definitely need people to come and talk and speak up, and as they have done tonight, say it's not quite as you're suggesting, you know, towards sort of enthusiastic amateurs or outsiders. And so we definitely would need that strong voice still, even if those people weren't members.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hay. I do agree with that. We do need some link to the executive. I suppose from my point of view, it's justifying why we're going against the guidance, and is a long-standing tradition enough of a justification to not go with the guidance? We'd have to justify that as an audit committee if we were ever challenged, or like you say, if anything did go wrong. Councillor Lee, I'll bring you in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that the last couple of points you made and Martin made was basically what I was going to say. With all of these things, it's if something goes wrong, then one has to justify the reason for doing something differently to what might be expected. However, I do think that there's some ambiguity in the statement. It could mean, because we do have a political balance on this committee, it could mean that that's acceptable, but it doesn't say so. And it's a pity. I just wondered whether we can perhaps ask Ian Hughes to do us some kind of a legal paper about and his understanding of what the issues are and what a reasonable interpretation of the statement would be. But I do think in everybody's interest, both the executive members and the ordinary members of this group, we want it to be right, we want it to be worked, we want to have the benefit of a wide net of expertise on the audit committee. But I just think we shouldn't change it from what it is without knowing that there's a very good reason to do it. And if we leave it as it is, we need to know what the potential downside of that would be. So I'd be interested in a legal view from Ian Hughes, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Councillor Dacre.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Sorry to come back in again. It was just to say that I must say that I'd assumed that if the two current Labour members of the executive were no longer to be members of the committee, that we would be replaced by non-executive members. So the size of the committee should remain the same. It's just that we would have to change those members.
Yeah.
And I suppose, yes, I'm not sure that Ian Hughes can necessarily give us any legal guidance that's above and beyond what David Harwood is telling us, but it is possible that just a period of reflection might assist, because I don't think anybody's really thought about this until the papers came out, so that might help.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks, members. Is there anyone else who would like to add comments before I move to the recommendations? Okay, I'll start with that latter conversation. So I'm going to make a recommendation to have a period of review so we can all reflect, and if we can bring it back to the next meeting in July. I don't really want to drag out a protracted kind of repeat the debate we've had this evening, but if we could bring it back at the next meeting to make a decision on that, again, as a recommendation to full council, I think that would be the recommendation from that conversation. The other recommendation, as Councillor Hay requested earlier, was a report on the progress of project management arrangements in the AGS. And then we have the 5 other recommendations which are noted in the report. I'll just very quickly run through them and then I'll move them in block if that's okay. To request the Chief Executive to consider how the annual governance statement and review of effectiveness will be undertaken in future years. To review the 2022-23 draft AGS, which is what we've done, and we've considered other issues. Approve the draft annual governance statement as it's in the papers, and receive an updated copy of the annual governance statement at a future meeting so as to formally approve its content ahead of its publication alongside the 2022-23 statement of accounts, and to approve the range of significant governance issues definitions as set out in paragraph 6.2. Anybody willing to second all those recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Hay. All those in favour? That's carried, members. Thank you very much for your contributions on that. Right, we're nearly there. Item number 10, Internal Audit Plan 2023-24. David, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I don't think so. Hopefully it's all quite straightforward. Well, there is actually, the only thing I will make a mention of is in the no, I won't. I'll leave it as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, David. Any questions from members? None on this side? Oh, yes, Martin.
Sorry to spoil the party there. Yeah, just a question on it's on 7.2 regarding the internal audit charter and the proposal that that it wouldn't be brought as a matter of course as it have been previously to previous meetings. So I just wondered whether how new members of the committee would actually see that. Whether it's provided as part of their induction pack, because if anybody joins the committee from now on, if they're assuming this approach is agreed, then they wouldn't see the charter, would they?
I'll come back on that and say that's a really good point. And of course, when I was preparing the this particular report, and again after conversations with the chair about reports wanting to be sharper and more focused, the reason I excluded the chart was the fact that in effect it doesn't alter. It's supposed to meet public sector internal audit standards, so when it's approved, unless the standards alter or there's a big change internally about who internal report to, that chart will remain unchanged. And again, I'm quite happy to circulate the current charter to all members outside the meeting so that they're aware of it. But again, if members want to receive the charter every year, then it's your decision. It was just a matter of it just being sort of expedient for reporting purposes not to include it. But I'm happy to either include it in future or, like I say, circulate it outside the meeting.
Thanks, David. Martin, do you want to come back on that at all?
Well, I mean, I agree. I don't think it needs to come every year if it's not going to change, but it's about new recruits. I mean, this time there's some new members of this committee, so and next time there'll be some new members, won't there, when there are elections again? So it I'm not sure what's in the induction pack for new members, but I would have thought that would be one of the documents that would be included. And therefore, it wouldn't need to come here to the meeting itself, would it?
Yeah, I'll pick that up with Amanda Benning, Martin. It's a good point, just to make sure it is in all the audit, the induction packs.
Okay.
New members, thank you. Councillor Bellinger.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm actually going back slightly to maybe item number 6, and that's with regards to planning. I mean, my thoughts are really that it's gone beyond scrutiny with what's been happening recently with planning, and that it should be maybe looked at by audit committee. I don't know what other members' thoughts are on this, but it's not been good news for Calderdale, and I think it needs to be brought up to maybe to us.
I'll pick up that point, Councillor Bellinger, in the next item in the tracking reports. I'll come back to that, if that's okay. Thank you. Martin, sorry, I think I moved on and you had a second question.
No, well, I think I was a bit slow, so I don't think it was your fault. Yeah, I wanted to check whether the committee were happy with something which is in the report. In 3.1, it's asking the committee to approve this plan, as you'd expect. But then in 5.3, it says that any changes to the plan wouldn't come back to the committee for approval. They would be approved by head of finance and the chair, or head of internal audit, sorry, and finance if necessary with the chair. So it's just whether committee members were comfortable with that any changes to the plan that they've approved would not need their approval.
Can I just come back on that, if I may, before other members of the committee have opportunity to comment? I think it's 5.3 is just saying that, in effect, on a day-to-day basis, you know, if an email arrives tomorrow from the chief exec saying we've got an urgent issue in, I don't know, somewhere, pick a service, leisure, can you go and do something? I don't want to say, I'm sorry, I can't do anything until after the audit committee have approved it in July, which is in effect why it comes back to me and I say, yes, I'll do it, but I'll speak to the head of finance and I'll speak to the chair to say we're going to be knocking out audit A and replacing it with audit B. They hopefully would agree, and then we'd go back to the audit committee to report that. At the current time, and again, the chair will probably correct me if I'm wrong, I don't understand, I don't believe there's that formal or semi-formal process in place at the moment, and the head of audit just amends the audit plan as they see fit without referencing to either the head of finance and chair. So it's just formalising, I should say, the process that's currently in place, I guess.
Well, it sounds like you're actually strengthening it from what's in place today, but not going as far as it might do in terms of if the committee's approved the plan, the committee should approve changes to the plan. I mean, I guess it depends how material they are, as you say, David. I mean, if it's additional work, then that's fine, although presumably additional work means there's an impact on not delivering something that was agreed in the plan. I mean, I guess if it comes back to the committee for information, the committee's got the opportunity at that point to say, sorry, I'm not happy with that. You know, we signed up to something being delivered, it's not being delivered now, and I'm not comfortable to agree to that. So I suppose, provided the committee's made aware, there is an opportunity, albeit they haven't approved that change being made at that point.
It is, I think, probably just as an example of that, is that whilst I'm presenting the report here for reference, within the sort of table that's listed as the plan for next year under public services, there's already been a conversation held that where in effect we were hoping to do a piece around risk management around public services, that's now been knocked back. So in effect, that's likely to be done, but probably in the second half of the year. But again, that's just an issue that something occurs, you know, you're set up to deliver something occurs, and then in effect, you aren't going to be able to deliver it for whatever reason. You know, you don't have staff off sick, for example, to say, we just can't deliver risk management in public services, or we might get a request. So, like I say, I'm trying to introduce something that's more formal than we currently have, but in effect, go back to audit committee, because there's generally an internal audit report of some form or other to each audit committee meeting, and just have the opportunity to say, we've had to omit a piece of work on this service, but we've substituted with a piece of it, and we can provide some explanation if you wish to say, well, we would do as to why that's happened.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Thanks, Martin, for those points.
Okay.
Councillor Lee. Councillor Lee, you're on mute.
I apologise. Just going back to a point that Councillor Bellinger mentioned earlier about planning. I'm not sure who should be looking at what's happened here, but what's happened with planning is a very serious thing. And we almost need to audit what the procedures are when very important things happen and a large proportion of the elected members are not aware of it. And I've written to the council leader about what happened with this letter from the Secretary of State. And I've noted, and I'm sure she's very well aware of it, that for 4 weeks, we were not given any information or knowledge about such a letter. And we wrote, I wrote to her saying a couple of weeks ago, in fact, George Robinson wrote the letter a couple of weeks ago, saying, we've only got now we've found out about this, there's only a fortnight for us to react. Otherwise, these duties will be taken away by the government on planning decisions. And I got a reply which didn't mention that there was a 4-week delay in telling us about it. We found out by accident. I know I can't speak exactly for the other party leaders, but I assume the Conservatives weren't told, neither was anybody else. And that gives me real grave cause for concern, because we then found out from the leader's reply that in fact they had reacted and produced an action plan which unilaterally had then been sent back to the Secretary of State's office without involving any kind of a democratic process or input from the other parties represented here tonight. So it's a very unsatisfactory situation, and perhaps we should need to get it debated at full council. But it would appear that this letter, written to the Chief Executive of Calderdale, for him to do something with, it was dealt with in such a manner that only one party were aware of it, and they acted upon it without involving anybody else. And it's such a serious thing, communicated to certainly the party leaders to try to put our heads together in deciding what to do about it.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Points well made. I think we will look at the tracking reports, because planning services is one of them. And obviously, I think it's place scrutiny is also looking at planning. And I'm keen to avoid duplication of work, but we'll obviously look at what we can in audit. And if it's a favourable one to bring back, then we'll obviously do that. Councillor Dacre.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't want to get into politicking in this meeting if we can avoid it, because that's not what audit is supposed to be about. But I would really echo what you have just said, Chair, which is that this letter was apparently written by the Chair of Place Scrutiny, not the leader of the Conservative Party, and it was responded to. And at the moment, it appears that Place has had oversight of planning matters, I think for a year or more. It's been looking at various planning issues, and it would appear to be the appropriate place to deal with much of this.
Thank you, Councillor Dacre. Councillor Swift.
Yeah, on reflection, Chair, Councillor Dacre's broadly said what I was going to say. I do think most of those matters are matters for scrutiny rather than for audit. The issue clearly with audit would be in terms of whether policies have been properly followed. The issue of how the letter was handled is probably one that's best discussed by the leaders at a leaders meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swift. Any further comments on the internal audit plan, members? Okay, the recommendation is that we approve the internal audit plan for the next 6 months, ending on the 30th of September 2023. Can I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Dacre, thank you. All those in favour? That's great. Thank you very much. That's carried. Right, moving on to item number 11, Internal Audit Services Tracking Report 2023-24. David, anything to add to this report?
No, thank you, Chair. I think you're familiar with it. I've just summarised the changes in paragraph 6.2 as to what's happened, but no, you're familiar with it, so I've nothing I particularly want to raise. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, members? We are on this item to consider the report and to decide which we usually pick 2 to bring back to audit, which 2 we'd like to receive more information about. Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to come back and I suppose, apologies, sort of rediscuss something that I know we discussed a while ago when I first joined the committee, that I was interested and I suppose to some degree surprised that the committee didn't receive all of the audit reports to review. But I appreciate that the approach that has been agreed is that members select 1 or 2, and that's fine. We did have a discussion at some point, I think, where we said, but where the result is so poor, and obviously the example is the transport one here, whether that report, if the result is so poor, it would be appropriate for the committee to see the report at this stage rather than simply let audit carry on doing their good work and chasing down completion of the actions with the action owners. So I just wanted to sort of reopen that. So it just seemed, I sort of feel like I feel I should be reading that report and understanding why that result is so poor and what the actions are, rather than sort of being aware of it, doing nothing and waiting to hear about it when there's the follow-up. We might select it at some point, unless of course we do select that now. I suppose we could do that, but I know the approach tends to be to leave it to audit to follow up. So it just seemed to be such a poor report, not poor report, apologies, David, poor results, that we should see it automatically because it's a limited assurance. So that was the question, really.
No, it's a good question. And do you mean just for those that are limited?
Yeah, probably. That's right. I appreciate the committee's decided it doesn't want to see all of the reports. It doesn't want to see all the greens, and it's comfortable to leave it to the audit function, internal audit function, to chase and then report back. And clearly, as this shows, if the actions are not completed in the appropriate timescale, there's further reports, isn't there, and tracking by this committee to say, hang on, that's not good enough. We need to know more about that. But I don't know. I don't know what it depends. I don't know what other people feel. They might feel actually I'm aware that that's a very poor result, but I'm content to not know more about it at this stage.
Yeah, no, take your point, Martin. Does anybody have any? Councillor Prashad and Councillor Lee, I know you probably have your own questions. Do you have any comments on this particular point? Yeah, Councillor Lee. You're on mute. Oh,
yes, Chair, I do. I agree with the point that Martin has made, and I agree with him. This is a discussion that we've had a number of times. I am a strong believer in exception reporting. I'm interested in the reds, and the greens, generally speaking, take care of themselves. I'm very concerned about adult care charges, as I mentioned earlier, as to who's decided. There's been no detail about what has been looked at and what hasn't, and what is being looked at and the stage at which the investigation has proceeded, we're just getting that they've looked at one, they're looking at another 7 more. They've not looked at 2 at all out of the 9. And I just feel so concerned about it. And I feel that I'm not getting enough information to start making decisions about what's best to do about it. We're just in the dark. So I think I do agree. We don't want to have the same meeting every time. And just to illustrate this point, since for well over a full council year, the whole of last year, Chair, when you've been chairing this group so ably, I've been asking for something that's been promised to me month on month on month on month about an information request that we made when Stephen Baines was still the chair of this, so it's well over a year ago, about a proper audit of the outcome of major capital projects in the borough, mainly in Halifax. And I was actually, as you know, Chair, I think it was said last time that it would be reported upon this time. And again, it's not made the list. So I'm just concerned that we have meetings, debate things, come to a common conclusion, we vote and support most things that eventually after a robust discussion. And yet one of these that has been on the list for months and months on end is still not on the list. And I'm concerned that the things that we're deciding at this committee are being passed over by someone somehow, and it shouldn't be that way.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Isabel, I can't see you on the screen, but if you are still there, I know that I did mention it, and Councillor Lee did as well in previous meetings. Did your predecessor hand over that to you? And can you give us any assurances that that is being worked on?
If I'm being honest, I do recall that there was something when I first joined about that report, and I'm sorry I haven't picked that up. But now we've got now Councillor Lee's obviously raised that as an issue. We can go back to that. I just kind of the confirmation was it an audit that was requested, or was it just a report that was requested? And was it on something? Was it specifically? Was it on the Princess buildings?
No, it was on the major projects, and that included all of them really. The Peace Hall, the Princess buildings, Northgate House, you name it. It was we asked for an audit of.
No, I think I need to go back and see what the actual ask was.
Well, we asked for, Isabel. We asked for what the original estimated costs were, what the final outcome was.
Yeah, no, I can definitely get that. I can get that information for you. I'll just look at what the actual original question was, if that's okay, so that I give you a clear answer. Yeah.
But I had already raised it as an issue several times before tonight as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll look into that one.
Can I just add, please, at this time, if I may, that the issue about looking at costs around in Princess buildings is included in the audit plan for the first 6 months of the year, picking up comments that have been made at audit committee previously. But again, like Isabel, I was unaware that there'd been comments made about projects within Halifax town centre in general. So that's something that when I've reviewed audit committee minutes, I've not picked up as an issue that's been asked. So again, like Isabel, I think we'll probably go back and then have a conversation about what needs to be done and how it's going to be done, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, David and Isabel. Councillor Pressure, I'm just moving back to Martin's point on the kind of limited reports and whether to bring those forward as an automatic thing. Is your question on that point, or is it a different question?
It's on adult services and wellbeing.
Okay, is that something that we can bring back at the next item? Is it on the adult charge?
Yes, adult charges. Yeah.
Okay, I'll bring you back on that on the next, if that's okay. Councillor Baker.
Just very quickly, my recollection of the discussions around project management are that I think part of the issue was that this particular item is about the internal audit and their plan, and the projects are managed by their own risk management registers. And so I think there was a bit of conflict about whether this item was really the place for having the sort of review that Councillor Lee is asking for. So I do think we'd need to go back and see what was actually determined as a result of the earlier discussions about it, because I'm not saying that audit shouldn't be able to look at some of that, but I don't think it doesn't sit quite comfortably into the internal audit plan, or it didn't at the time, as is set out there.
Just a point of order, Chair, please. It's not Councillor Lee. This was put to this committee by Councillor Baines, who was the chair of the committee, and supported by me. And at no point, and we've raised it pretty much every time. So those that have been on the committee for the last year will have heard this before. And nobody's said it doesn't fit the profile. It was a simple request, and it was agreed that it would be dealt with by the next meeting. And that's been the story every single time. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lee. Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify what I was the question I was asking. It was I think what I was proposing is that where there's a limited assurance audit, as the transport one here, that would be shared with the committee now. It wouldn't be a member selected one that would come back in 3 months' time. So, you know, it's so material that we should be fully aware of it now, not waiting to find out more about it later. So I think that was that's right. Limited ones, you would say automatically would be. The audit completed a review. It was limited, and here is the report for your information.
Yeah, and then if we wanted more information about that as a member selected report, we would bring it back.
Yeah, I think that's right. The member selected is a separate thing, isn't it? Separate process, isn't it? Separate request.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I'm happy to put that forward as a recommendation if we do have a seconder on that. David?
Yes, can I just ask on that, is committee wanting the report presented to it as written? Because what you might find is that quite a bit of it's redacted on the basis of not only officers that are named, but also issues around weaknesses in control. So you might then come back and realise that you're not getting the full picture, because I wouldn't want to put Calderdale at risk of, I don't know, potential loss through, however unlikely, through identifying weaknesses that we've identified within internal control systems. So just on bearing in mind that that's likely to happen, that you would get redacted reports and not the full report if it came to, committee in open session. If it came as a private in closed session, then you would get the full report, I would think, in most cases. But again, just for information, for something for you to bear in mind.
Sorry, to come back. Sorry, Chair, can I just come back? That's a good point. I hadn't thought about the public nature of it. So I suppose, as David's just said, is there a way to share it privately with committee members without that being made available to public generally?
It's possibly something that we can include in the private meetings with internal audit, I imagine, David, if that's...
Well, it would be, but if in the case of transport services, for example, that's being issued, and if we don't have the private meeting till September or October, you'd still never see the report. The only other thing that could be done is reports that have a limited or no assurance opinion given to them when they've been clarified with management and the sort of final report has been prepared and agreed, that gets sent off to the relevant portfolio holder when it gets issued to management and closed. And again, I'd have to have a conversation, I think, with Isabel as to whether she'd be happy for that report as well at the same time to be issued to all audit committee members or not. I don't think it, you know, I can't say yes, I'll do it, because I think I probably need to have some sort of steer from Isabel as to what position she wants to take, but it's something that we can have a think about in a discussion so that you get it outside the report. And then, for example, if you're wanting to say, yes, we want to have an executive summary in the same way you do for member led reports, I can't see any reason why we couldn't present that report to the next meeting if need be.
Okay, is it something that maybe we can pick up outside the meeting, David and Isabel, just to see if and how that
yeah, I think so.
And then bring that back at the next meeting just to report back on if and how it can happen. Okay, are you all right with that, Martin? That
Yeah, happy for you to have a think about it. I mean, I suppose it is the question of, is there only me who's interested in reading more about this? I mean, perhaps everybody else is comfortable to say, no, it's fine, I realise it's limited, but I don't need to know more about it at this stage.
No, I personally, I think it makes sense what you're suggesting, and I would support that.
Just how to do it. Then.
It's just the how, yeah.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay, members, any more comments before we move to the recommendation? No, okay, so we need to decide whether we do wish to receive any more information about any of the reports listed on the tracking reports at the next meeting. Does anybody have any recommendations on or asks of what we would like to see? Or are we happy to just take away that conversation we've just had and see if we can any thoughts on that? No, okay. Okay, well, we'll pick up that conversation outside the meeting and then bring that back. I suppose I'll have to, well, I'll propose that we've considered it, which we have, but we don't want to see any further information at this stage at our next meeting, but we will bring back that conversation that we've just had. Anybody willing to second that? Thank you, Councillor Bellinger. All in favour? That's great. Thanks very much, members. Right, on to the last item of the evening, which is the member selected internal audit report. We'll consider the cybersecurity one first, which is at Appendix A. Carl, is this over to you?
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to come to Audit Committee, especially with a substantial audit. Basically, let's just move to any questions.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear, Carl. Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Hay.
Yeah, Carl, I'm just looking at the sort of recommendations and follow-up responses. I suppose I had a couple of questions on number 2. What timelines are you working to decide whether a network-based intrusion prevention system is going to be brought in, and what are the sort of barriers to do that? Because the initial recommendation looked quite strongly that it should be considered, but maybe should be done. So I was just wondering where we were with that. And then secondly, I know I know these are on green. Number 4, we don't need an external consultant because we're going to have 2 posts filled under the heading of cybersecurity. Have we actually got those people in now who are going to be looking at that?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hay. So let me just take you back to the first recommendation, which was around the PSN accreditation. We have regained our PSN accreditation, so I think that adds weight to the fact that we probably don't need consultants in per se at this point in time. And part of the PSN process is that we have to undergo a 12-monthly IT health check that will kick off in July. The 2 posts are now out to advert, so we are recruiting them. They've completed all of the internal processes, so they're now out to advert. So hopefully we will be interviewing early part of June, and then it will be dependent on how long people have got for their notice periods before they join us. So hopefully that answers the question around that. The Intrusion protection service is something that we're very keen to have, and basically it is currently in business case stage. So I'm currently writing a business case that will then go through the relevant funding options to establish funding for that, and then we'll be able to progress with that. In the meantime, we've been doing quite a lot of work around cybersecurity, and thank you to colleagues on this call who've recognised that that's a robust area that we have for the council. So hopefully that answers both of your questions.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, certainly in terms of number 2, yeah, it does. If we're moving to business case, that's excellent news, and I'm definitely supportive of us pushing forward with this stuff. On number 4, I suppose the initial recommendations said basically said somebody needs to review arrangements relating to cybersecurity. You're confident that you can recruit people, and the guys who are coming in are going to be able to do that.
Yes, but one of the posts is quite a senior post, and will have credentials that are nationally recognised, and that's supported by the IT health check, as I said earlier, around PSN compliance. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, it would be good. I mean, again, you get into a tricky area, don't you, about what can the audit committee see and discuss, but it would be good to see something of that at some point, given that whilst it's a very strong score, as you say, it's a fast moving area as well, isn't it? And it sure is.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problems in coming back to audit at any point, just to give an update on either those two or future audits. As David mentioned earlier, we do have an IT auditor who's working closely with us to progress things, and I'm confident that we're now moving at pace, which is really good news.
Great.
Thanks, Councillor Hay. Any more questions, members? Well, you've got away lightly there, Carl.
Thanks very much, Chair. I will leave you all in peace. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thanks for attending for the whole meeting, just for a short period at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you as well for all your work that you do.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks. Okay, members, we'll move on to Appendix B, which is the adult care charges. Councillor Lilly, I'll bring you back in because you did make a point earlier at the beginning of the meeting about adult care charges, and I know you're keen to make some more points on that.
Thank you, Chair. I really don't know where to start on this. We've been talking about it at different stages of the meeting, but I'm just very, very concerned about it. And I remember when we discussed this at some length at a previous meeting, the problem that we've got is it seems as though the infrastructure of the way that the whole thing works is creaking. It's been said it's not fit for purpose. But before we introduce the new software that is going to come in the next 2 or 3 years, that some interim system is going to have to be put in place. And it just sounds like such a terrible mess. I don't really know where to start with it. And we're not being given the required amount of information of which of the 9 items they're dealing with, where the progress lies in regards to those. And we've only had 1 out of 9 of the things that were pointed out 2 years ago dealt with. So it just seems like a horrible mess that's got to be untangled somehow. That was the reason for my concern, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. I can't see who's attended from adults on my screen.
Well, can I say, Chair, if that's okay, that the Assistant Director was due to attend but is unable to, and due to my oversight, for which I do apologise, I didn't invite the Director for Adult Services and Wellbeing to attend in his place. I apologise to the committee for that oversight. All I can suggest maybe is to say that this report is brought back to July, since you've not at the previous meeting identified any internal audit reports that you wish to bring back. But it's brought back to the July meeting for you to have a discussion, as Councillor Lee has highlighted about the implementation of the agreed recommendations.
Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty disappointing, really, that we've got nobody to answer the questions for us. Yeah, I think that's the only thing we can do, isn't it? There's no point asking questions if there's no answers to be given. Martin, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to echo what Councillor Lee has said, really. I mean, this report just doesn't provide any assurance to me at all. I mean, it's just full of vague statements in terms of the update. We've got really, there appears to be some movement, doesn't there? There's talk about things starting and evaluations starting or about to get underway and that type of thing. There's just no dates. I mean, there's just no indication about when any of this work is actually going to start, how long it's going to last, when it will be finished, and what, you know, when the policy and the processes will be improved. It's just I'm sorry, it's just I don't know. And as you say, disappointing nobody's here, but I mean, I'm happy to send the questions separately. We haven't got time to go through all the individual questions I've got on this report. It's just it just doesn't provide the update. Well, assuming there is an update, it's not telling the story. Unless there isn't really a story to tell, which why it can't tell one. I'm not really sure whether there is any progress and it's not doing itself justice, or there isn't any progress and that's why somebody's just coming up with a load of waffle that doesn't tell us anything. So it just really poor, particularly after I would have hoped that the directorate had the message from the last meeting. Oh, sorry, not a good way to end the meeting, really.
No, I totally agree with both your points, and as you say, you know, we made our feelings very clear at the last meeting, which is why it's had to come back this time, and it's really disappointing to see that the detail just isn't there at all, if there is any detail to even add to the report. Isabel, did you want to come in on this point?
I was only going to say, would it be helpful to maybe update that appendix as it is with some dates and with some more robust actions? And maybe David and I could go away together and talk to the assistant director, because I feel like there is some action happening, but the clarity around maybe how that's been worded is not as robust as it could be. And maybe we could include that in the minutes for this meeting rather than waiting until July, so that we maybe try and do that at an earlier stage. Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Even if we can get some dates in, some timeframes. And also I note that some of those actions say that they will be delivered by the end of May. Well, we are nearly at the end of May, so there might be some updates on some of those actions.
Yeah, I think that would be a good move forward. Yeah. Councillor Prashad.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I share Councillor Lee's and Martin's sentiments here. I'm fairly new to audit, but I have to say I was utterly taken back by the fact that money is being wasted here hand over fist. There are 8 recommendations still to be introduced. Nothing seems to be being done, and I know I'm repeating myself here, but I really want to push this forward, and I think that figures should be produced on what they think they are losing. Perhaps that might give people a bit of impetus to do something quickly, and I'm sure something could be done as a temporary measure, but this has got to be dealt with very, very soon. It's 75% of the overall yearly budget is spent on social care. How much of that is being wasted? And that really, really annoys me. So that's my rant over.
Thanks, Councillor Prashad. Councillor Dacre, sorry, and then Councillor Hay.
Yes, well, I think to some extent there must be a bit of a disconnect. Well, there is a disconnect here between what the officers think they're telling you and what you feel they're telling them, because they obviously provided the information for those updates, and as David has explained to you, neither the director nor the assistant director were able to attend, and indeed the director didn't know anything about it about the meeting and about the date of the meeting until today, and also the lead member is also not available. But she wrote to myself and David Harwood this afternoon after I'd spoken to her about this, and she said she would have been very happy to attend, and that she wanted to give reassurance to the committee that lots of focused work has been undertaken and progress has been made. And she says, as evidenced by the action plan, obviously members of the committee don't agree with that. So progress has been made in key components of policy development, which is moving us towards an improved overall position. And it's also my understanding that in the interim, because the fact remains that we can't, the long-term solution is the new IT system. And because that just inevitably takes time, the directorate were asked in the meantime to ensure that they had some form of interim solution. And I was reassured today that there is a form of interim solution, but I can't give you any more detail about that. Obviously it's not my portfolio, and this was just a rushed conversation at a meeting about something completely different. So I think, as I say, that it is very unfortunate that it's happened like this, because I think had the assistant director, who's the one that's been more closely involved, been able to attend, he would have been able to answer some of the questions that you have and made you feel more comfortable about the position that we're in. So yes, I think that if when it does come back to us in July, I think we're saying, and with the suggestions made by Isabel, then I think that well, I hope that you will feel more comfortable with the position that we're in.
Thank you, Councillor Dacre. Councillor Hay.
Yes, I'll be quick. So I just wanted to focus specifically on action 7, which is actually one with a date against it. Sadly, that date's mid 2025 for when, and there's just something here where I think, and I understand it's difficult when you need new systems, but we can't get too system orientated when it comes to solutions. And at the end of the day, there's a service user or customer at the end of this, and we have to think about them. So I just can't believe there isn't a way to allow people to pay by direct debit. I just cannot believe there isn't a workaround. So if people are going to take this away and come back in a couple of months, I would just ask that they really give it a good go and try and think if there's a solution to that one at least.
Thank you, Councillor Hay. Isabel, I hope you've noted all those comments, and just so we can ask for an updated report to come back in July with figures, dates, specific details around what's been discussed, and then hopefully somebody will attend to answer those points of concern and questions. Okay, members, so we'll bring that back in July. We do usually have another report that we do consider at the same time. I'm guessing it's back under item 11, all the tracking reports that we choose from. So does anybody have a second report that they would like to look at as a member selected report? Councillor Bellinger, I know you mentioned the planning review. I don't know how others feel about that, or maybe picking a limited one. Any recommendations or suggestions? No? Do we feel the adult care charges is going to be a meaty enough report to maybe consider in July? Councillor Lee.
Thanks, Chair. Well, certainly I do. I think it's a matter of great urgency that we get to know more about what's going on with that. And if we're scratching around to find something else to bring back at the next meeting, I'd love to see a report about project management of major projects in Halifax. I'd like to see it. And it's 2 years since we first asked for it. So if we want to do something to add to the list, I'd very much like to see that in July. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lee. Okay, so we've got a couple of recommendations there. The first one is to bring back the adult care charges in July, and the second one is for the major projects. I'll just bring in Councillor Kearney first and then David.
Look, I was just sort of thinking that it's fair enough what Councillor Lee's asking for, but it just seems a bit broad, like, can we have a report on the projects? I mean, I take it there's been a bit of a more specific like request in the past that like new members to this committee probably, wouldn't be aware of yet.
Yeah, it's also one of the it's in the internal audit plan as well for the next 6 months. So we could just kind of bring that forward, I guess. David?
Well, what I was going to say is that obviously I'd be happy to bring forward a report on the project manager issue, but of course there's no report to bring forward because we've not done a piece of work around it. So that piece of work would have to be done, agreed with management, etc. And it's just not going to be feasible to deliver that before the July meeting. So I mean, you can obviously say, yes, please, we'll have a report, but I don't think there'll be a report for me to present, in all honesty.
Okay. Councillor Lee?
Well, I absolutely, if I only met you tonight, David, what a wonderful job you've done. I absolutely believe what you're saying, but I've been led to believe that there was such a report, which clearly there isn't, and that it was always going to be delivered at the next meeting. And, it leaves me pretty unhappy about this. It would have been far easier to do a report and to have a debate at this committee about that particular subject than continually kicking it in the long grass. And so I do see it's on the work programme, and perhaps what I should agree now is I'll wait until it comes round as a regular item on the work programme, which will give everybody the time to answer the very specific questions that were asked for Councillor Kearney's information. It wasn't just a general update, and we wanted to know chapter and verse about how we got from a start position to an end position where the difference was many millions of pounds. Simple as that. So, Chair, I'm happy to leave that to take its place in the work programme. It's in there for the next 6 months. We can't do the impossible, so I'll just wait and bide my time to hear the report when it's being written and delivered. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Councillor Lee, thank you. Councillor Bellinger?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think just going on, adding to that Councillor Lee's been on about, we did into litigation proceedings with the developers on Princess buildings, and I think possibly something with the Peace Hall as well. That seems to have been kicked into the long grass, a couple of years back. So I think really that should be something that we sort of like look into as to where that actually is. Who's going to be losing money here, who's going to be gaining money here. And I think certainly something that needs to be brought under audit committee and like I say, bolted on to what Councillor Lee's been suggesting this evening.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Bellinger. I'll pick that all up with Isabel and David and see what we need to look at and bring to audit on that particular issue. Okay, members, if there's, we'll just I'll propose that we recommend just bringing back the adult care charges for the July meeting, and we'll go from there. Can I have a seconder for that, please? I think I've got about 5 there. Thank you. I'll take Councillor Bellinger. Thank you. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you so much, members, for your attention and your contributions. And sorry, we have slightly overrun, but please enjoy the rest of your evening and thank you for your attendance.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. I'll sign this one off now. Okay.